Sure, thanks. I get the great pleasure of introducing you all to Deanna Apps. She is a meteorologist on my staff with the Corps of Engineers out of Detroit. She's also in charge of our forecasting program. So she has a lot of background and knowledge in all the forecasting products that we produce. A lot of experience. She handles the bulk of our outreach, discussing water levels and forecasts with the public. So today she'll be able to build a little bit on the presentation that I gave a couple days ago, but talk a little bit more about some of the localized conditions and some of our shorter term products. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dee.
Hey, all right, thanks, John. So for the presentation today, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, kind of focus on Lake Huron and talk about some of the impacts we've seen over this, last year or so with some of the high water. So if we can go to the next slide. So I kind of want to talk about three different aspects of the Lake Michigan-Huron water levels over the last year or so. So this graphic here on the left is Lake Michigan-Huron water levels. There's the black squiggly line that you see is actually our daily water levels. And then the blue dots are the monthly mean levels. And this is going back to October 2018 through, the squiggly line goes through the last day or so. Those black dash lines in the middle are the long-term average monthly levels, and then those gray dashes that you're seeing at the top and bottom represent the record high and low. So as you can see, finishing off 2018 and entering 2019, we were somewhere in the middle between long-term average and record highs. And then you can see as we went through the spring of 2019, the large rise in water levels. And then last year, we just really never got a full decline in water levels. It was only about half of what it typically was. And then so far this year, because we really started the year at such high water levels, we've just seen a continuation of records broken really through August. And, we're starting to be below records now. But I kind of wanted to talk about some of the events that led to each of these and kind of quantify some of that impact on water levels. So the first one I want to talk about is that large rise in 2019 due to increased precipitation. So next slide, please. So these are just a couple graphics to show what was going on in that spring of 2019. On the left is a diagram of above normal precipitation, percent of normal precipitation between that March 1st of 2019 through May 31st of 2019. So you can tell that those greens, blues, and purples are all indicating precipitation above normal, especially when you see those blues and purples. Those are, 150 to 200% of average precipitation during the spring. And a lot of that, being around that Lake Michigan basin and the southern part of Lake Michigan. And then the diagram on the right is a representation of stream flows, which can indicate the runoff in the region, which is a main component of the water balance. So this is something that John talked about on Tuesday, that, the main components of net basin supply being precipitation, evaporation, and runoff. And stream flows can be a good indicator of runoff in the region. And you can see that, in April, a lot of the lower peninsula of Michigan is near normal, still head above normal in, northeast Wisconsin and upper peninsula of Michigan. But you can see as you go to May and June, just how wet it really got. And you can see that by the stream flows, really above normal throughout most of the region by May and continuing in June. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight some of the events, we had, just to remind people of what was going on. March, there was riverine flooding due to snow melt. Temperatures got really warm in the middle of March. So increased snow melt and rainfall led to, a lot of riverine flooding in the region. And then a significant event, which really propelled water levels across the region, that happened toward the end of April, beginning of May. You can see that some of these rainfall totals over a 4 or 5 day span are close to 5 inches, which is, even more than a monthly total, just falling in some regions south of Lake Michigan there over just a few days span. And so from, that March monthly mean to that July monthly mean, the water level on Lake Michigan-Huron rises 20 inches. And that average rise is typically 11. So we're almost doubling the average rise, in those months due to those wet conditions we saw. Next slide, please. So that was talking about number one, that large seasonal rise. The next step is number two, the lack of seasonal decline in the fall of 2019. So next slide, please. And again, these are very similar maps, except from the first one I showed with the percent of normal precipitation, but this time just for the 2 months of September and October, respectively, on the left and right. And again, you can see just these very wet conditions that were experienced in September and October of 2019, which offset really any evaporation that was occurring during that time and allowed for that lack of seasonal decline to occur in those later months of the fall. And then next slide, please. And so, as you can see, the stream flows again high during September and October due to those wet conditions we were seeing. And then on the right, another factor, last year in the beginning of winter, we saw very warm conditions over the region. So this is another thing that, John hinted at on Tuesday was, evaporation, is really, significantly occurs when you have that colder air moving over the relatively warm lake water. Well, when temperatures are warmer than normal, we don't see as much evaporation, and that occurred in December and January of last year. We really didn't see the amount of evaporation that we would, on average, and, that also contributed to the lack of seasonal decline as well. Next slide, please. Again, just want to highlight some of these events that were occurring. This is rainfall just from, over a day span on September 28th. Again, you're seeing rainfall in 3 to 4 inch rain just in a span of a day or two. And then again on the right, this is up in Wisconsin near Lake Winnebago on the Michigan shoreline as well. September 30th to October 2nd, we're seeing, almost 5+ inches of rain in some regions that, is just almost, it's greater than a monthly total in the span of a few days. And during that time, the Lake Michigan-Huron monthly mean water level actually rose slightly from September to October. So the monthly mean rose from September and October in a time of year when we expect the water levels to decline. So next slide, please. And again, it's another slide just showing that the December warmth, indicating that we weren't really seeing some of that evaporation. And then this was an event that happened last year, January 10, 11, that heavy rain again on the southern shore of Lake Michigan, leading to some lakeshore flooding, and that eventually turned into a wintry mix. So talk about in a time period like January, we're getting like 2 inches of rain in some areas of the basin, and obviously that's going to have some impact. So from October to March, that water level only declined about 3 inches, and on average it's 6 inches. So, again, just reiterating that lack of seasonal decline. Next slide, please. And then lastly, I just want to highlight the 8 consecutive months of record high water levels, January through August of 2020. That you can see there, they've highlighted by number 3. Next slide, please. And again, just showing some of the current conditions. So we have seen, in these recent months, we have seen some dryness now in the region. You can see from the soil moisture, this is a calculated soil moisture anomaly change from the end of July through October 20. You can see the yellow areas showing that, soil moisture is declining. So the soil is drying out. And you can see here on the right, again, that similar graphic of percent of normal precipitation from July through September. You're starting to see some yellows and oranges indicating percent of normal precipitation below normal. So the actual, and the rise this year in Michigan-Huron from March to July was 9 inches, when on average it's 11. So even though we were setting records this year, it was mainly a result of, the contributions of factors 1 and 2. We have seen some drier conditions, and, the rise this year was actually below average. But it was just the water levels just started this year so high that they didn't really have a chance, essentially. So next slide, please. I won't spend too long on these. I know John presented these on Tuesday, but I did want to just talk about some of our forecast products again. This is our 6-month forecast for Lake Michigan-Huron. The website link there is below. Really just showing here again these 8 months of record highs. We are in the period of seasonal decline, and we do expect water levels to be below record highs over the next 6 months. So we do the forecast at the beginning of every month. We'll have a new forecast out at the beginning of November. Next slide, please. And then lastly, I think John also showed this on Tuesday. This is our 12-month water level outlook. So it looks a little bit more into that longer term. This is our current 12-month outlook. It's a scenario tool that allows us to use historical net basin supply to see what the potential range of water levels would be over the next 12 months. And, so this, if you want more information, this is on the web, but the current scenario is based off La Nina years, that purple range, since that's what's currently in the forecast. But like I said, this is a product on our website, a tool that could be used if you want to look out a little bit further than the 6-month range. And then I think I have one more slide here. So this is a product that our H&H office worked with our emergency management office to create this really wave run-up flood inundation mapping tool as part of technical assistance. So this was developed to provide coastal flood elevations and mapping to communities to help them, assist them in placement of emergency mitigation structures, or to tell them where in their communities they were at maybe high risk of flooding to occur. So, this was a product that was developed, in coordination, like I said, with our emergency management office to help provide a little bit more guidance in that technical assistance realm to some of the counties in Michigan. So I think John has a little bit more detail on that too. So I think if you have any questions on that, I'll probably direct you to John. But that's all I have. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks, Dee. Does anyone have any questions at this time? Again, raise your hand or throw them into the chat box. Oh, okay, let's see. First question, how much of the Michigan-Huron watershed is in Canada? How does USACE integrate weather climate data from the US with similar data from Canada?
Yeah, so the only part of really the Lake Michigan-Huron basin that's in Canada would be that northern part of Lake Huron. So there is part of the, Canadian, there is, Canada, it does border part of that basin. At the core, we do, I know a lot of my graphics, typically are, especially for when I'm talking about Lake Michigan-Huron, because most of the basin is in the U.S., are from the U.S. side, but we do look at the Canadian, products as well. They also have forecasts or climate forecasts as well. So we do look at those. I think most people in this group know that a challenge of the Great Lakes Basin is that it does border both countries, and the products don't always overlap. And it's just it's something we have to deal with. And hopefully maybe something will come of this group, and we can maybe there's a product that's available to be used in the future.
Great, thanks.